as I started teaching erotic massage as a way of relating to sexuality in the massage context, and teaching it to all sexual orientations, I had to learn about energy. Because once you start building sexual, what people call sexual energy, but I don't think there's any such thing as sexual energy. It's energy that's expressed through sexual, if you want to do earth, wind, water, fire, the earth would be the sexual arousal and with the engorging of in the different organs in the body and different places in the body. Then you have sexual fantasies, as in the air. Then if you want to have emotion, sexual desire, sexual lust. And then if you want to have the real energetic fire, then you have orgasm. So if you want to do the shamanic perspective, a quick going around the wheel, there's your four aspects of sexuality in a sense. So I found that I really had to learn how to deal with sexual feelings, arousal, and emotions, and I learned how to do things energetically to take that energy that's being built up in the genital massage demonstration in the erotic massage class, of which only a small part was the genital massage, but of course that was the part that made it different from most other massage classes. And so I began to realize that there's a lot of energy here, like we all know. And then I wanted to be in a place where we could really be in tune with it and not necessarily go into an automatic, I have to express it this way. And so doing this, I began to realize that what I was focusing on was something like what people would call Tantra, or a more inclusive term, I would say, is shamanic sacred sexuality. That's the more inclusive term. So I use the word sacred sexuality, Tantra, Taoist sexuality, in terms of what we're doing here in the West, pretty much interchangeably. And I was studying with a Tibetan Lama, studying metaphysics, studying Western sexology, and I really eventually found that where I was getting the most information about dealing with energy was in shamanic contexts, studying with either semi-traditional or traditional, not always studying with, sometimes the way you would sometimes study with a traditional shaman, you just sort of hang out with the person. There was a Hopi healer that had a major impact on me. And I said, I'd love for you to teach me. He says, I don't teach. And he doesn't teach. Well, he was teaching all the time. You just had to hang out. just hang out. And a little note here, in terms, since this is your courses or your group is referring to sacred sexuality as shamanic apprenticeship. I think that's the languaging, correct, Leslie?
Yes.
All right. Yep. So the shamanic thing is not always conceptual. It's really more of a transmission, energetic learning. So being in the environment, being in ceremony with, interacting with the person who is developed in a way that I would call a shaman is really the best way to learn. And I want to talk a little bit today about sexuality, how I see sexuality and spirituality or energy and shamanism relating. But I also want to talk a little bit about what I mean by shaman. Because what a shaman can be doing, if this person's really developed in terms of the way that I define the person as a shaman, then they're basically going to be transmitting. And your being will be picking up more or less some transmission, which may not at all be cognitive. And that's totally okay. You realize if you grow up in shamanic culture, from in utero, you are in ceremony often throughout the year. The Hopis are about 8 hours north of where I live here in Arizona. And it seems like they have like their their ceremonial year begins, I think, somewhere in January, February. I remember someone saying once. And they have a number of ceremonies throughout the year, and they're always preparing for ceremony, preparing for ceremony. So their lifestyle is around ceremonial context. And you go into ceremony that have survived for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, they're usually going to be continuing and surviving, so to speak, because they're effective. They make some sort of impact. And just being in that context, month after month, year after year, it has a tendency to move us energetically in certain directions. Now, if you're anything like me, I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, and it was severely lacking any sort of shamanic qualities. I think there were hardworking people with good intent, although incredibly racist, because I grew up in the South in the 1940s and 50s with Jim Crow laws. No black person was ever going to come to my white church. But so there was a lot of hypocrisy and bullshit. But in many ways, many people had really good intent. But it was not of it, the spiritual religious context was not one that would lend us towards moving in a shamanic development fashion. Now, we skip to the 1970s in Tantra. I took my first Tantra class around 1974, one of the first times I heard of Tantra. And this, of course, I was living in San Francisco, which I call sex mecca. And so there was a lot happening there around sexuality. And over time, I came through study and experience, began to find that there is a close relationship between sexuality and shamanism, or being a shamanic, being a shaman. And so I want to talk about that in various ways today. And I really invite questions, which I might go off in tangents. At some point down, we'll be taking about half an hour to do an energetic meditation, energetic ceremony, however you want to call it, because the main focus today is a part of that link between sexuality and shamanism, or spirituality, particularly shamanism, is what I call merging. And I define it in a very specific way. But first, let me give you a context of how to look at sexuality. I think that perhaps culturally, but also energetically, there are four main ways that we can think of our sexual nature. I'm using the word sexual nature to be very broad here. And we could go earth, wind, water, fire if you wanted to keep it sounding nice and shamanic. So the earth... and it's not how you sound it, but what you can do, what makes a person a shaman. And the New Age world doesn't understand that often, from my point of view. I'm a New Ager, so I'm criticizing people with whom I identify, and myself. So the earth element perspective of our sexual nature would be procreation. We have things called sex, and sometimes that results in the sperm and egg uniting and resulting in eventually a birth of a new incarnation. And some perspectives that is the only way to look at sexuality. Another mode or sort of perspective, and this is the air perspective, so to speak, wind perspective, of our sexual nature is what we could call as romantic love. You have to remember, I grew up in the 50s where husband and wife did not sleep in the same bed in the movies. They slept in separate beds. And so romantic love was really fueled by often some sort of sexual attraction. Romantic love is awesome. Falling in love every few weeks is one of the ways to keep life very, very exciting. Maybe not grounded, but very, very nice. Um, and some people often try to get back to that place of falling in love, but after you've known someone for 5 years, it's hard to be falling in love. That doesn't mean that a relationship cannot be very meaningful after 5 or 50 years. I'm not saying that. It's just that that romantic love might come into more of something we call companionship. Um, so, falling in love is like you may know the song "Falling in Love with Love." It's like falling in with make believe. Or I have often walked down the street before, but the pavement always stayed beneath my feet before. All at once am I, several stories high. I'm on the street where you live. I mean, it is awesome falling in love, but that's sort of the air element with the romance type feelings. And it does have, from my perspective, very much of an underpinning of our sexual nature. Then comes the hippie era, and you kick out the jams, and we got sexual lust and sexual passion. Why don't we do it in the road? Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And we started having porno, and there's more explicitness in the Hollywood films as well. So the predominant mode in our culture now would be uh, sexual desire, sexual. I'm using less in a positive way right now. Sexual passion. Call it sexual passion. Hornysville. Horny. I wonder if it's eek is another way of saying horny. And so that is the main way we think about. Obviously, most of us contemporary people think about this, about our sexual nature. But coming into the 70s, at least in the West, we started to have these influences from India, Japan, Tibet, of things called Tantra and Taoism, also China. Uh, and so we started evolving into a Western sexual Tantra. Some people call it Neo Tantra. And I suspect even really, really traditional Tantra in India probably had a very, very sexual initial basis. But Tantra, of course, is much more than about sexuality. It's about love, death, birth, uh, transformation, and all of that. And basically, I think Tantra in its more original roots, I would think of as being shamanic. Um, but if there are any bits of sexuality in the Tantra in the Americas, it got stamped out by the conquistadors and their dogs. I remember taking Human Sexuality 101 many years ago, and there was this wood print of the I think it was Cortez, but conquistadors setting loose his dogs on, they were uh, same-sex twosomes, which were totally accepted in Indian culture, uh, that they were about to conquer, the conquistadors were about to conquer. And so this was such an abomination that the whole idea of homosexuality was totally unacceptable within that framework of the conquistadors and their Catholic religion, that they just kill the fuckers. So I'm sure that any vestiges of sexuality that's been seen that was in shamanic traditions, at least in the Americas, was very quickly put to death and silenced. Because you learn if you want to live, you don't talk about certain things. You don't do certain practices. Now, the only inkling we have of it comes through what's called Kradoshka, which is a popularized concept. Some of you may have studied Kradoshka. But that comes out of one particular person, Swift Deer. Um, and uh, uh, and I will say, contemporary shamans are basically contemporary people who are into shamanism, at least in the United States, are at least publicly very uptight about sexuality publicly. But they're very representative of most people who are professionals or attempting to be professionals, really uptight about saying anything about sexuality. So you have a profession, that does touching. It has sensual or contact, energetic intimacy. You teach that sexuality, sexual arousal, genitals, sexual energy is wrong, evil, immoral, unethical, illegal. So the practitioners don't get trained in this. So how does it come out? In dysfunctional, perverted ways. Because, I mean, I did massage professionally a number of years before eventually, well, for a number of years. My perspective is, if you're doing massage and you don't have any sexual feelings anytime, you are shut down, suppressed, and turned off. I mean, any feeling, emotion can occur in a massage. That doesn't mean we act on it in terms of hopping on the table or necessarily touching genitals, but to be in denial about sexual feelings in a massage means that you are not aware, from my point of view. And also, if you're not aware of either anger or fear or other emotions, feelings coming up in a massage process, either from yourself or the recipient on the table, I'm using massage context, or in psychotherapy, or in group interactions that have nothing to do with sexuality. If you're not aware of that dynamic happening, and you try to suppress it, then it can come out in very potent ways and explode out. Uh, and I mean, you have all these religious evangelical leaders who get caught with their hand, so to speak, in the cookie jar, so to speak. Over the years, we've heard about such leaders. And so, anyway, the religious leaders I'm referring to. So, my perspective is it's really important that professionals be trained in relating to sexuality in a compassionate way. And too bad within our country that we cannot have laws that allow people to say, oh, I don't do that type of massage or body work, but here is someone who does, to refer them to such a person. Now, I don't know what any of you do professionally or personally, but I'm not suggesting anyone be sexually interactive with their clients or their students, and I'm not suggesting not to. Simply saying we need to be clear about what the process is, and if there's no training around that, and the idea that it's, like I said, immoral, unethical, evil, and all that stuff, then it's too easy for it to come out in negative ways. So, that was an aside point, which I'm not sure where I was going with that, other than I was wanting to emphasize that, because I know some of you are probably professional practitioners in some way. In fact, I started teaching erotic massage to twosomes of all sexual orientations because I didn't want people coming to me for happy endings. I wanted to do massage. But I didn't want to negate sexuality, but at the same time, I wasn't there to give people just happy endings. So the way I came to terms with that sexuality in the massage context was to start teaching it in a structured manner for people who are in a relationship, either just for the seminar or for in a focused relationship already, to help them, support them in learning how to touch with awareness, to touch with sensitivity, to have good strokes, and to include the genitals as a part of the body like every other part of the body. I mean, because until we get to the place that our whole physical organism is one big erogenous zone, you're going to be a very poor lover. I mean, I know magazines will talk about, oh, the erogenous zone here, erogenous zone there. And I wouldn't even say the erogenous zone is in your mind. The point is that it's much bigger than that, than the mind or certain places. And so my perspective is you treat the whole body, in a sense, as an erogenous zone. And so when I was teaching genital massage, I was teaching right along with foot bathing, facial massage, back massage, so that the genitals were treated like every other part of the body. Anyway, but once you start touching the genitals and focusing on the genitals, then then sometimes it's like catching hold of the dragon by its tail, and you just hold on for dear life. And so choosing to step into sacred sexuality was what a lot of people were doing because they wanted to embrace sexuality in a fuller context. But that context that I've seen, which started somewhere in the 70s, left eye gazing and breathing in unison, of course, it's not only that, but there's a lot of that. It's like, is that as far as we can go? And I felt like I wanted to go further, deeper, wider, more inclusive. And so when I was teaching erotic massage, I began to sense I had to go deeper into the energetic, not just the somatic, but the energetic as well. Now, people can do psychological, energetic. You can do, it's not always touching the body, the organism. But once I had my neck injury, suddenly I couldn't do the somatic. And it wasn't easy to go to the mountaintop anymore. So I began to focus much more energetically. So the fourth category, coming back to where I was talking about, the fourth mode, we might put around in sexuality, of our sexual nature that is I call energy merging sex. Energy merging sex. Or we could call it the energetic, depending on how you want to simplify it. And I didn't realize what I was stepping into, but as later on as I kept doing this and came to have more understanding about how we function and interact energetically, something I began to realize is that when we have an orgasm, and right now I am referring to any type of orgasm, but we refer right now to the sexual orgasm of the good old M&J, Masters and Johnson, pelvic floor contraction type of orgasm. When we have such an orgasm, what happens spontaneously, without attempting to do anything, is we merge four ways with another person. Now we'll talk about merging in a moment. We merge automatically, only momentarily, but that's one of the things that happens. For a shaman to do what he or she does, by my definition of shaman, he or she has to merge with the client, with the person in ceremony, with the group, has to do the merging also. But it's done through intending. It doesn't happen spontaneously. It does not happen spontaneously. We develop the energetic structures, which most people do not develop, to be able to vibrate at what I call higher ranges of frequencies, which I call dimensions, which is a different way than most people define dimensions. Well, let me define it that way, but we're not talking about the same thing I often find. When people talk about we're in the third dimension, trying to get into the fifth dimension, and some people are already in the fifth dimension, then they're talking about something different than what I'm talking about. Because I don't want to take the time to explain that, but they're talking about something different. I'm talking about ranges of frequencies. As we develop our energetic structures that are inherent in all of us, but most people never develop, shamans do develop this. That's what makes them a shaman. We develop the abilities to merge intentionally with another person. Merging that happens in orgasm or with a person who's a developed shaman in a healing or transformation ceremony, he or she merges by replicating, vibrating at the energetic patterns of the other person. So you become one energetically. Let me quickly say what merging is not. Many people who refer to themselves as empathic, when I've read their energy, when they talk about what's happening with their empathic thing, is they're around someone that has a headache, suddenly they have a headache. It's more like their own energetic patterns, in a sense, shut down and are replaced by the other person's energetic patterns. So you're taking on their energetic patterns. Merging is not that. You remain in your own energetic patterns and you add on the other person's patterns vibrationally. Now, how that is technically happening in the physics sense, I don't know. But this is how I understand it. When I merge with you, I am still me. And I'm also beginning to vibrate at your patterns, or you with anyone else. I'm just saying me in this for example. So merging is not simply shutting down your own or suppressing your own and the other person's patterns taking over. Therefore, you feel their headache, for example. That's not that. Secondly, merging is not what we call courting or hooking. Now, there are many ways that we interact energetically with other people. One of the ways, unfortunately, that some people interact is by attaching their energies, energetic structures, to another person's and literally extracting the intensity of another person's energy. Energy suckers is my word for it. You can call them vampires. And I tell you, when you have an orgasm, you get a lot more energy. That if you want to suck energy, be around a person when they're having an orgasm. You'll get more energy. So the idea of vampirism and sexuality being tied in together in our mythology, there's no accident in that, from my perspective. Merging is not courting someone. Courting, energy sucking, is a win-lose game. When you merge with someone, one of us has an orgasm, you get 100% of the energy. I also get 100% of energy. It's not 50-50. We both get in a sense, the same percentage, the same amount, same amount. This is basically how I've come to understand it. So when I'm referring to merging, it's not what some people refer to as empathic, which is different than empathy. It's not empathic, although it may make a person a good psychic to be empathic, but they pay a price for it. And it's not, merging is not courting, energy sucking. And I will say, there are way too many people in the sacred sexuality field and the contemporary shamanic field who are energy suckers. Way too many. I would say that most New Age conferences, I see New Age conferences now on the web, internet, and I read the energy of the pictures of all the presenters. It often comes up around 60% of the people. If I'm getting an accurate reading, about 60% of the people would fit my perspective of being an energy sucker. And they're the top of the heap of the pile. Top of the pile, top of they're the stars in the New Age field. Too often it's the case for contemporary shamans as well. It doesn't happen as much with traditional shamans, except cons who come into to the mainstream society and say they're a shaman, and everyone say, "Oh, good, oh, yummy, real shaman." Some of those people, they may know shamanic practices, but if they're energy sucking, they're not a shaman by my definition. The way that I'm talking about energy sucking or energy extracting. So, merging, number one, is something that's very positive for both people or group as a whole. The one I'm referring to is merging. Secondly, when we merge with someone, at least three things happen. One is we have now a combined knowledge base. And I don't mean intellectual knowledge or factual knowledge. I'm talking about energetic knowledge. your knowingness and my knowingness now say combine. So sometimes I have some of the parts of the puzzle, and you have the other parts of the puzzle, and suddenly I got the whole puzzle. So it's a knowingness, in case of transformation, of what and how to transform, for example. Secondly, there is a combination of what I call energetic abilities. I have some abilities, you have some abilities. I have a saw, you have a hammer. We get together, you have a saw and a hammer while we're merged, and I have a saw and a hammer. Again, it's not either or, it's both and. We add together and we both have access to it. That's part of merging. The third thing is intensity of energy. If you want to take your car across town, probably 80 octane or whatever it is these days, will do fine. If you want to go to Mars, you got to up that octane, honey. It ain't going to make it. You got to have more oomph, more. Yeah. So, when people merge, their intensities level, their octane levels get combined to now you have a higher octane, which is necessary to do greater transformation. So, I would say that not the only thing, but one of the main roles of a shaman, at least in traditional culture, is, we usually would say the word healing, but I like the word transformation. Transformation includes starting at some place of dysfunction, illness, not okayness, but it also can start at the place of being good at something already and now becoming better. So I hate this perspective that we call sexual healing. You have to justify sometimes we have to justify what they're doing legally. Well, this is sexual healing. Well, no, I'm not interested in going to sexual healing right now. I feel good and I want to be better. That's one reason that Tantra was successful, because it didn't talk about you had to be fucked up to go to a sex therapist so you can get better. You can be good and let's make it even better. Now that doesn't mean that sex therapists only function or act that way, but you know, Matthews and Johnson legitimated sexuality because they basically put it in a sexual therapy context. Oh, it's sex therapy. Oh, that's okay to do that. If you're going to have pleasure, that's a sex worker. That's prostitution. And from my point of view, sacred sexual practitioners are a lot more than fantasy fulfillers. It's not just about pleasure, it's about growing. But still, you can be really good at something and be even better. So I use the word transformation to include both of those categories, rather than the word healing. I don't like to justify sexuality being okay by saying it's sexual healing. But I do like the song Sexual Healing. You know, that's okay. Marvin Gaye can sing it that way. It's all right. You know, he got his message across.
That's right.
Regardless of what word he said. So I'm simply saying, make out whatever you want, but don't approach it. You know, there's something wrong with you, client, and therefore we can make you better. So I went off on my one little tangent there, and I'm trying to go back to my main point, which is so when we combine our knowing knowledge base, our toolkit, our abilities, and our intensive energies, we're more likely to have transformation, deeper transformation, than we might have some other way, because we're merged. Now, we can interact with another person either as a somatic way or psychological way, and it be very meaningful and growth producing. But if we can also merge with them in addition to that, there'll be other things going on. See, my perspective is what a real shaman can do is not seen. It's what he or she is doing energetically that makes the real difference. And so that's one of the reasons I talk about looking externally at what a traditional shaman does and trying to simply learn and repeat that ceremony, that behavior. I always put it this way. Putting a feather in your hair and beating it on a drum doth not a shaman make.
Yes.
Beating the drum can indeed help move us in that direction. I've been to 13 Sundance ceremonies where that drum is going day and night except for a few hours. And people are going without food and water because I was quadriplegic. They said, you drink water and you eat food. So he told me I couldn't, do it the other way, which is a good idea because I would walk in a walker in sand to the tree and back. Most of the time I use my wheelchair, but once in a while I would get up my walker. And if I didn't have the right energy, I could fall right out there, which is not a good thing to do. So anyway, but in 3 to 4 days without food and water, in 100-degree weather in the daytime and 40-degree weather at night, sometimes with wind and dust and rain coming in, it's a little bit challenging. And that drum beating, it's beating, the singers are singing, they're beating and singing. It's sort of like the lifeline in some ways. So drumming is very, very valuable. It's a very important shamanic practice. I'm simply saying, doing the drumming in of itself is not the essence of what a traditional shaman generally is. What he or she is doing unseen is the essence, which is where their quote power is. So it's really important. I mean, some people just say, oh, if I can go learn their ceremony and emulate what they're doing. Nope. This really was really clear to me. There was a local medicine man here at Tohono O'odham, which used to be called Papago, but they call themselves Tohono O'odham. They're in a large Tohono O'odham land area here in Tucson. And I got to know a medicine person there. And the first time I was in one of his ceremonies, he faced the different directions and speaking his language as well as English. And he had a feather. He didn't have a drum. And he would have us all face in a certain direction. Then have us turn 3/4 ways counterclockwise to face another direction. And then a half turn in the opposite direction we would turn. And somewhere along that, in every one of his ceremonies, from the very first one to the very last one I attended with him, I would feel this energy come in, energy shift. I said, wow. And I assumed that it was something like, when you do not a maze, but a labyrinth. You follow it, you know where you're going eventually, and you see your way. No maze there, you just follow the path. And you get to the end. I once had a nice little orgasm right in front of the Santa Fe church. There's a church in Santa Fe that has a labyrinth right out in front. There I was being holy, getting sanctified right in front of the big Catholic cathedral.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. And the labyrinth is a very, very meaningful, powerful meditation to do if you've ever been in the labyrinth. And so I thought maybe the combination of half turns, 3/4 turns, this direction, that direction, was what made the energy shift. In the 5 or 6 years, 7 years, I was known him. Eventually, was his best man at his wedding, so we got to be quite close friends. He had developed diabetes and eventually had to have a foot amputated. So in the last ceremony I was with him, before he died, he did not stand up and move this way, that way, this way, that way. He sat in a chair, faced one direction, and did the same prayers. And the same energies shifted. I said, whoa, wait a second. It was not this moving this direction, that direction, that particular, that alchemy of that movements. There had to be something else, because I felt the same thing. I don't see energies, I feel energies. And so I said, this is what's been happening for, I don't know how many years I knew him, 5 or 7 years. And the same thing happened. And so that's when I started to revamp my conceptualization of what's going on. It's what he was doing energetically, which he probably was not cognizant of, but because of his own energetic developments and the culture he was raised in, and the role he had come into, he was able to do certain things energetically. And so I think now that while the form or the alchemy of the ceremony is very valuable and important, what is the real movement of the shaker is the energetics of the practitioner, of the shaman. So, where does sexuality come into this? If you want to develop those structures to function interdimensionally, like, let me back up. A shaman, by my definition, has to be able to function in other dimensions 24/7. 90% of the population function in only one dimension, the way I use the term dimension. Shamans can function in 4 to 20 dimensions. I don't want to take the time to go into an explanation of that, but basically they can function in more dimensions because they've developed energetic structures that enable them to vibrate at higher frequencies, ranges of higher frequencies. Now, people who are into meditation, energetic ceremonies, and so forth, when we go into sort of a space to do our ceremony or to do our sessions with people, we often start to change vibrationally so that we are beginning to access or function in a very limited way in 2 or 3 or 4 of these other dimensions. But to be there 24/7, functioning 24/7, takes an actual development. To be fully functioning in these dimensions, we have to develop our energies, develop these energetic structures. The process of developing them and the process of these structures functioning, or running on fuel, so to speak, requires the type of energy that we cannot really get from food, sunlight, and water. It requires the type of energy that the average person can get in orgasm. Either a sexual orgasm or these energetic orgasms that become very popular in Tantra and sacred sexuality fields. Those orgasms literally, in a sense, bring in an intensity of energy that help us to develop and then run these different energetic structures that are inherent in every one of us. But it's like the orgasm is getting enough fuel, so to speak, to prime the pump. So generally I would say, if you're on a shamanic path, and given my perspective of a shaman is not someone in terms of what he or she does externally, but what he or she can do energetically, in a sense, internally, or the unseen, then you have to have more energy, certain types of energy. And one of the ways to get that energy is an orgasm. So if you want to be a shaman, one of the fast routes to becoming a shaman, by my definition, is to have lots of orgasms.
Oh, darn. Right.
You can have them by masturbating. You can have them by having sex with another person or persons. You can have them by doing the breathing type of orgasms that you see are very popular, boom type of orgasms. And some people have them quite spontaneously. But a lot of these energetic experiences that in a non-sexual context, some people would call mystical experiences. But when I read the energies up, that was another orgasm and just a different type of orgasm. but still an orgasm. That literally brings in energy to help develop these structures, these energetic structures. And once they are developed, the very act of intending, which is how we function interdimensionally, we actually then bring in energy by the very act of our intending. So that you get actually more energy that way. But to get to that place, you have to be born very, very, very energetically developed, such as the Dalai Lama, or having some sex along the way, with assuming you have orgasm, helps prime that pump. Now, once the pump is primed, you get these other energetic developments going nicely. You don't have to stop having orgasms. It's just that they don't serve as quite the same function that they did initially. And then that's taken me right back to the saying from some of you familiar with Osho or Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. And I'm not sure if he said it quite like this, but it's something like this. It's one of his famous sayings that sex is the beginning, it's not the end. But if you miss the beginning, you might miss the end. And so I don't know what he meant exactly, but I interpreted this say, actually, I use the word, my website is sexualshaman.com, but actually it should be orgasmic shaman to be more technically accurate. But the alliteration of sexual shaman just catches their imagination. And the way that most of us have an orgasm is by being sexual in some fashion. And I do put masturbation and self-pleasuring in that category as being sexual. That is a way to step into this. And in these teachers that teach, that our spiritual development, you start at the third chakra up and don't go to fourth chakra up, I guess it is. Don't go to those lower chakras. Well, either they're fucking stupid or they're trying to control you. I mean, sum it up very simply. Come on, folks. Now, that doesn't mean you go out and have sex with anybody, everybody, or you might. I mean, part of my development along the way, energetically, was I used to do 3 hours of continuous 10-minute massages at swing parties. Swing parties were, in this case in California, male and female twosomes come to this gathering, and they have an agreement that they have sex with anybody there. That's basically the perspective you go to a swing party, at least in California, or in San Francisco in the 70s and 80s. So I my massage table was set up in a room right beside the group room. In the group room, you go in there, you're basically saying, I'm open to anybody. More, you can say no, but basically it's open-ended at that point. So I was doing massage, and just about 10 feet away was a doorway to the group room, and there was all night, well, not all night long, but for quite a few hours. And so I was sitting there doing 10-minute massages, non-erotic focused, because they get all the sex they want. So I was there trying to accomplish in 10 minutes what I try to accomplish in an hour in a regular massage, in terms of relaxing people, getting the muscles to soften up and all that. And so all this sexual energy, people call it, and pleasure and motive and sound instead of and then you had the music, love to love you, baby, love to love you, baby. So this is quite a training I had, being there, being present, and being able to feel and embrace all that sexualness and do massage. I was nude, the recipient was nude. It was 10 minutes. It was 10 minutes on, 10 minutes off. My objective was with all that energy, let's accomplish in 10 minutes what it usually takes an hour to accomplish. So that was sort of my little goal in my mind. And so you just get to groove on all this energy around you. and it just all the sounds and yumminess and so so that was an awesome opportunity for me to learn to be in a very very sexually active context and then just be there with the energetics, just be there. I did that for several years. I got paid money for it too. And if I might find someone on the table that I connected with, I could say, "Would you like to meet when I'm off duty?" Woo! Man, and it was, it was like, I don't know, it was a good job.
Awesome.
And I wasn't tired, but 3 hours of straight massage, you pretty wipey out. Tired? Who's tired? Not me. No, sir. Let's go. Let's boogie. Let's do it. So we would say, those were the days, my friend. I thought they'd never end. So that was San Francisco Bay Area, 1970s and 80s. So, so this is all of my background is really into Tantra, Western sexuality, and shamanism. And so, going back to the massage situation, we need to, if we're in a massage or with clients or people in the ceremony, to be there with the energy and be at choice about how we act out that energy. And most people never get an opportunity to get a chance to make errors around that. They're always acting it out in a professional context, and they get sued for improper behavior or something like that. So a very conscious awareness approach to a nature of sexuality is very, very important, and it truly is lacking in a lot of professions.